right? And that's what they continue to do. And therefore, it's been a slow burn because it goes from place to place. And
because they own the government, and because it's complex, they can engage, like Japan, 20 years at the feet of zombie banks.
Right. That's exactly. Thank you for bringing up Japan. That was the other half of my train of thought. Thank you for finishing that. So anyway, he talks about how Japan was that lost decade, and I'm reading this chapter about Japan in this book, and I said, you know what? We are halfway. We are 5 years into this. We are halfway in. A lost decade doesn't really sound so long when we're already talking about the fact that in 2007. Citigroup went to Hank Paulson and said, "Hey, we have a tremendous problem here. We need government help." And then after that, Bear Stearns imploded, went to J.P. Morgan. We still support that trade. We still support that to the tune of $30 billion of Fed guarantees. All of that started 5 years ago, and we're still nowhere near the end. So we could be looking at a couple lost decades. So that, in answer to your prior question, that's why I see this as a slow burn rather than a complete explosion. But that just makes it slower. It doesn't make it less dangerous.
Well, it almost makes it worse because it's a creeping kind of ambient background death of an economy, not stuff you can see really quick. But even though we're incrementally into this, and they're having to admit more and more it's a global depression that you've talked about, not just a recession, they're losing so much credibility, and people are waking up. I mean, how do you see this ending then, or what are ways to start reversing this?
Well, I think that wake up thing is very important. As I just mentioned before, it's really important. The only way you can start to reverse this is to start looking at points of accountability, right? You're not going to get points of accountability from the guys running these banks. You're not going to get points of accountability from the president. You're not going to get points of accountability from the head of the Treasury or the head of the Federal Reserve. It has to sort of come more from the bottom up, even if that's the level of attorney generals or whatever, or local councils saying, hey, we won't allow ourselves to be taken over, and individuals getting in there. I have a friend in Santa Monica who's running for council because he's just so appalled by what's going on around the country, and people getting involved in that way, because that's really what we have now. And what we have is the ability to connect to each other. And it sounds very sort of touchy-feely, but it's really true. It's listening to information. It's assessing what's true and what makes sense by filtering out the mainstream story that it's all somehow the fault of the economy, some amorphous economy that needs to be slapped back with austerity measures, throughout the world, as opposed to the fact that we were basically used by very powerful amounts of people and money. And so I think people have to continue to look up that information and not be afraid to spread the word. I really think at this point, that groundswell from the bottom up and local up is really what's going to make a change, because it's not going to come from Washington. It's not going to come from the UK Parliament. It's going to come from us.
Well, Nomi, we've only got a few minutes left here. NomiPrinz.com is the website for people that want to learn more. But looking at this, clearly the establishment knows they've done this. It's been a consolidation plan. They're training the military for domestic operations in Europe, England, the U.S. They now admit it's for the American people. It's for the British people. They now admit they're setting up classical spy systems. I guess they think that they can rob the whole economy, wreck it, but they don't care. They want to be in charge of it, kind of, king of the garbage pile or whatever. They think they'll get away with it. And now they're trying to sell this idea of, oh my gosh, the rich people are exempt from taxes, Warren Buffett and others. But then you go find out they actually wrote the loopholes to be exempt. They just want to raise taxes on the middle class, calling them rich, to get more of that money to transfer it to themselves and banker bailouts and city and county and state investments. And because there is a little bit of nuance and minutia there, again, some of the public's buying into it. A lot of them don't. But I look at Austin, Texas. Formula One, $100+ million in tax incentives. The city's giving them millions of dollars. This guy's buying his daughter, the biggest house in the U.S., gave her $3 billion as a gift. And that's great if that's $3 billion he made inventing something. But it's not. You find out all over the world he's basically a gangster. He pays taxes nowhere. And a lot of times the city councils sell out just so they can get a box and stand there with, their hats on and fancy outfits. They just sell out to be around celebrities. I mean, it's amazing how county, cities, states, billion-dollar sports stadiums, for Jerry Jones, paid for by the taxpayers. All the big corporations where I live are basically tax exempt, but I've got 30 plus employees. I'm not exempt. I've got the highest taxes you can get because I'm not some guy making $50 million, $1 billion a year. I mean, it's all targeting real entrepreneurs, and nothing is on the backs of these mega rich. And it's so frustrating to them to then see, I'm ranting because I'm so angry, to then see them scapegoat and blame middle class for it.
Yeah, well, one of the things, and this is along the lines what you're saying, that I read recently is that the IRS is looking to, expand and crack down. They call it cracking down on tax evaders, and they're looking at people who are in the sort of upper level of middle class, which is really nothing compared to any of the people that you're talking about, or that basically just run small businesses and employ people and pay probably for the health care of those people, or at least work it out together. And it's so expensive to do that. Meanwhile, these same banks, small business loans are at their lowest in over a decade and so forth. So all of it's really diminishing the capability of most people in this country to get ahead. And again, that's not capitalism. That is
fascism.
It's fascism. It's cronyism. It's stealing. It's downright pillaging. It's just ultimately not healthy for an economy. It's healthy for the people who are entitled and who feel.
But it's like you said, it is so conscious. I've seen this for like 5 years. Every year articles come out as they cut more and more of the fraud investigators at the IRS and the SEC and all of it. And then you find out the head of these groups are run by Corzine's former deputies.
Right.
And they've cut almost all of the corporate crime investigators and people investigating billionaires and even millionaires. And I actually saw headlines last year where they've put the majority of them actually on blue-collar people. They're not even going after the nouveau riche or somebody making $500,000 a year now. They're now even rotating it down to people that don't even hardly pay any taxes, literally, so there's no enforcement on the ruling class. I mean, this is conscious government by criminals. What do you call it, a kleptocracy?
It's a kleptocracy. It is government by criminals. It's bullyism. It's federal bullyism, because you're basically taking people that and I know what you're talking about. I have truck drivers who write to me, and documentary filmmaker, people who literally work all the time, save their receipts, make $40,000 to $70,000 a year, have most of that in legitimate expenses in 2, 3, 4 year audit procedures. It's ridiculous, and that's some combination of stealing and bullying and powerism and whatever it might be. But
thuggism.
Again, not thuggism. It is thuggism, and it's not, again, healthy for a long-term economy. And what happens is, by not connecting the dots on these things, and they are connectable, whether it is taxing the wrong people or auditing the wrong people, or the ones that really just don't have anything extra to talk about, have legitimate expenses, and don't really have the time to deal with hiring, fancy audit companies like these banks do, to figure out ways around the loopholes they're creating, to get to the next set of loopholes they can create. And that combines with banks being funded by governments, with whether it's cheap loans or subsidies to accumulate more banks, whether it's private equity or investment company CEOs like John Corzine getting a free pass on taking money from his customers, whether it's not really having any regulation on these institutions and saying at a State of the Union address, as Obama did last week, that somehow this problem is curtailed, that regulators used to not be good at their jobs. I'm paraphrasing, but now they are. All of this is part of the bigger problem, and the bigger problem is that there is this powerful group of people that run things that extract money unfairly, criminally,
and who are above the law.
And
that's what's creepy, is that they're truly above the law. I mean, Corzine lied to Congress, and so the arrogance, the bravado, whatever you want to call it, is now going supernova. It is a meltdown, and I guess they say pride goeth before a fall. In closing, thank you so much for joining us here, at the end of the first month of 2012. Tell us about your new novel.
Well, Black Tuesday actually looked at it's a historical novel. It's about a young woman who gets involved in seeing a lot of the fraud that's happening into the 29 crash with no economic background, just literally trying to help her family survive. Gets involved with the bankers, and in writing the book, I looked at a lot of the historical headlines and things that were happening back at the time leading up to 1929, and you would be just amazed at how many similar things happened then that have happened and reoccurred recently. So there's a lot of interesting characters that are based on or that are the real bankers at the time, but really it shows the book's really about a woman who finds herself in the middle of it all and finds herself having to fight back and the struggle in doing that. So it was a book close to my heart. I hope people like it. It's a way of looking at history without being bombarded with just the facts and sort of getting swept into the story, but seeing the parallels as well at the same time.
Well, it's a great book, and it's also a great idea. You've written a bunch of nonfiction books to then write a historical novel, because as you know, sometimes artists, researchers, journalists can tell a story even better in a quasi-fiction, and people will listen to it. I use movie analogies a lot on the radio because that's something that I found people can really click with and understand. Naomi Prinz, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you so much, Alex.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was an in-depth 40-minute interview. It's hard to talk to that lady for just a few minutes. So much knowledge. And we're all in this together. These tyrants think they can shut down our free speech. They think they can play us off against each other. They think they can use the complexity of finance to expose their fraud. Not anymore. People know the Federal Reserve is private. They know the ECB represents private interest in Europe. And they know that the very criminals that have engineered our economic problems are now posing as our saviors and creating a monopoly out of our pain. It is us or them. And you better use the internet now while it's still free to a certain extent, and use the internet to fight for its continued freedom, because the system's hitting the panic button. They're coming in trying to censor right now because they know the people are getting organized. They know the alternative media is growing legs and really developing. And they know that the people are getting together across political lines, whether it's the TSA or illegal wars or torture or banksters. And it's not about black or white, old or young. It's not about Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, any of this. It's about freedom versus slavery. And humanity is really starting to come together. And that's scaring the ruling elite who've gotten where they are through fraud. And it's going to be their greediness that's going to undo them. They already ran the world, but they had to wreck everybody's lives under them, I guess, just to dominate us. And it's in that pushing too far that they're going to fail. Great job to the crew. Great job to Aaron Dykes with the news earlier. We got a big special report coming up tomorrow evening with Darren McBreen and a lot more. So please join us this evening. And don't forget the free 15-day free trial still running at PrisonPlanet.tv. And also, please don't forget that we're on Roku now. It's gotten explosively popular there. Subscribers can access us on Roku. We're about to be on some other tabletop TV systems. And we also are going to end that yearly special tomorrow that we run in December and January every year, 44% off a yearly membership at PrisonPlanet.tv. God bless you all. See you back tomorrow night.